I'm probably going to sound like a basic mythology bro for saying this, but gods associated with thunder and lightning are some of the most badass in any pantheon. Think about it. There's Zeus, who rules over all gods and Greeks. Thor has rarely met a giant whose skull he can't obliterate with his hammer Mjolnir. And Set, the Egyptian god who rules over chaos and storms, used cunning and creativity to murder his brother Osiris and declare himself king of the gods. But as impressive as these deities' accomplishments are, they also have some embarrassing moments that I'm sure they want their followers to forget. Zeus almost lost his throne when Typhon knocked down his front door and tore the sinews from his body, leaving him as defenseless and limp as a biscuit. Thor had to dress up like a woman and almost marry a giant after he allowed them to steal his hammer from right under his nose. And Set made love to his nephew and then ate a lettuce wrap with his baby batter in it. So Set's not allowed to judge anyone for anything for the rest of all time. The reason for all this pontificating is that today we are discussing another god of thunder who is no different. Raijin from Japanese mythology, sometimes known as Raiden, is highly respected and worshipped by practitioners of the Shinto religion, and he's been adapted by some of the most celebrated franchises in human history, from Naruto to Pokemon to my personal favorite, Mortal Kombat. But as powerful as he appears, this god gets clowned on in almost every myth he's featured in. As you'll see, he doles out the occasional can of whoop ass, but more often than not, he's sent home crying to his mama, which is super awkward because she's a rotting corpse in the underworld. You guys are in for some truly messed up myths as we take our first steps into the world of Japanese mythology. But this episode wouldn't be possible without today's sponsor, Bespoke Post. Bespoke Post is a monthly membership that delivers a new box of awesome to your front door every month. Why are the boxes so awesome? They're full of top shelf goods from under-the-radar brands that specialize in outdoor gear, barware, home and kitchen goods, and 90% of the products come from small brands, many of which are based right here in the US. Just take a preference quiz when you sign up and they know whether to send you clothes, cool stuff for your house, camping and cooking gear, all high quality stuff. And with their new membership program, you could get great deals all year round, as much as 30% off or more sometimes, and it's totally free to join. Another sweet perk is that you can preview your membership before it's sent out, allowing you to swap out products or even skip the month entirely at no charge. You only pay for what you want. This month, Bespoke Post sent me some pretty legit stuff. Their Aura box came with a variety of American-made colognes that smell amazing, not to mention they're vegan and free of chemicals that hurt your skin. I'm also prepping for a camping trip at the end of this month, so I requested a few goodies to help me prepare for that. I got the Downpour box, which came with this rain jacket from Line of Trade. It has 3 layers of protection to maximize waterproofing and breathability, and longtime viewers will know I've got to mention the Weekender box. This bag was in my first Bespoke Post shipment years ago. I've used it for every weekend trip since then, and it's still holding up beautifully. Bespoke Post is already a great deal, and you can get a free mystery gift with your first membership purchase. Just click the link in the description and enter John Gift at checkout, or go to bespokepost.com/JohnGift. Whenever we discuss a new god or goddess, I always like to start with the story of their birth, because despite covering dozens of deities on this show, we've never encountered 2 with the same birth story, besides Apollo and Artemis, but they're twins, so it doesn't count. My fellow morbidly curious minds will appreciate that Raijin's story wastes no time before the messed up details roll in. For those new to the Shinto religion, their deities, the gods, spirits, and natural phenomena they worship, are known as kami, and the 2 central kami are Izanagi and Izanami. They created the first landmass by standing on the floating bridge of heaven and stirring the primordial ocean with a heavenly jeweled spear. Then they united and had several children in the forms of islands and gods. This was all going pretty smoothly until the birth of the fire god, known as Kagutsuchi or Homusubi. His mother, Izanami, was brutally burned when she gave birth to him. So brutally, in fact, that she was sent to another world, Yomi, the land of the dead. Naturally, Izanami's husband was heartbroken over the death of his beloved, so he followed her to Yomi, and here he was met with a horrifying sight: his wife's rotting corpse.
Ugh. Brother, ugh. What's that?
The details of this discovery are a little too grotesque to show imagery of here on YouTube, not unlike the game that inspired this episode, Mortal Kombat. But picture this in your mind. Izanami had given birth to 8 Raijins from different parts of her body, leaving her mutilated in the process, and each of these Raijins represented a different kind of thunder. Great Thunder was born from her head, Fire Thunder from her breast, Black Thunder from her stomach, Blossoming Thunder from her oyster ditch, Earth Thunder from her right hand, Rumbling Thunder from her left foot, and Couchant Thunder from her right foot. These 8 kinds of thunder all combine into one god that's known simply as Raijin. As you might expect, this was not a joyous reunion between Izanami and Izanagi. In fact, Izanami was so ashamed by her husband seeing her corpse, complete with maggots, pus, and rotting flesh, that it made her angry and embarrassed, so she sent Raijin and as many as 1,500 underworld demons to chase Izanagi back to the land of the living. This pursuit is how Raijin entered our realm and took control of the yet unclaimed domain that he is still associated with to this day. Raijin is an unpredictable god and the master of thunder, lightning, and storms. Mankind praises him for his life-renewing gifts that allow our harvests to grow in abundance and for protecting sacred temples and shrines. But he's also feared for causing droughts and his habit of flying through the sky on dark clouds, using his lightning bolts to obliterate unsuspecting mortals. Despite being a god, almost all visual representations of Raijin show him as a red-skinned Oni, which are supernatural beings from Japanese myth and folklore, comparable to trolls or ogres. This may result from him personifying a destructive force of nature, like many Oni do. He has arched eyebrows, a lean, muscular appearance, dresses in simple pants, and dons hair so unruly it would make the love child of Einstein and Bernie Sanders jealous. Statues and portraits of Raijin often show him with 8 drums that he uses to create thunder, and which represent the 8 forms of thunder his mother gave birth to. Additionally, he's usually shown alongside his brother Fujin, the equally destructive god of wind. Modern-day portrayals almost exclusively reference the brothers together, whether it's Naruto's dim-witted duo, Pokemon's Thunderous and Tornadus making up half the forces of nature quartet, or Mortal Kombat's Earthrealm protectors. As you're about to see though, these portrayals of Raijin are accurate to the mythology in a whole different way. Sure, they leave out his bizarre obsession with belly buttons, a personality quirk we'll talk about in just a minute, but basically, anytime Raijin shows up on screen, he fails miserably at his objective, and the myths about him may be what inspired this trend. The tale of Raijin's imprisonment is one of the most famous that he appears in, and it's actually the very first story included in the Nihon Ryoiki, Japan's oldest collection of Buddhist myths and legends. That might be kind of confusing to some because earlier I said Raijin was a Shinto god, not Buddhist, but the two religions share a lot of common ground, and to this day, Japanese people engage in both Buddhist and Shinto rituals. Shintoism has a longer history in Japan, extending as far back as 1000 BCE and originating with the country's indigenous peoples, while Buddhism was introduced much later in 6th century CE, but both belief systems are equally respected. Back to the imprisonment story, it starts off on a hilarious note. In 5th century Japan, Emperor Yoriyaku is laying in bed with his wife, holding her closely and caressing her soft white cheeks, when a man named Shugaru suddenly burst through the bedroom door. Shugaru served on the emperor's court and felt it was his responsibility to inform His Majesty that a terrible storm was making its way through the country, damaging everything in its path. The emperor, who was still flustered and embarrassed after being interrupted during a vulnerable moment, blurted out the first phrase he could think of that would get Shugaru out of the room. "Go catch the thunder then." We're not sure if His Majesty really expected Shugaru to take thunder captive, but the loyal servant immediately followed orders and left the palace on horseback. As he raced through the nearby villages, he called out to the storm that it must stop the madness and kneel before the emperor, but the only response he received was laughter. Shugaru realized his mission was doomed to fail without some divine intervention, so he prayed to Kannon, the goddess of mercy, for assistance. And evidently, she has authority over Raijin. I say this because after hearing Shugaru's prayers, she ordered Raijin to calm his storm. And he did. Then she delivered him directly to Shuguru, who tied him up in a sack and took him to the emperor. It had to have been pretty embarrassing for a god of Raijin's status to be taken captive by a mere mortal like Shuguru, but his imprisonment didn't last long. When the emperor opened up the sack that contained his prisoner, he was met with a flash of blinding light that terrified him. And after bribing Raijin with gifts, he ordered that he be returned to the exact spot that Shuguru had captured him. The only thing he asked for in return was for Raijin to bless Japan with bountiful harvests instead of wanton destruction. And Raijin agreed. The location where Raijin was returned would go on to be called Ikazuchi no Aka, which means the Hill of Thunder. And several years later, when Shuguru died, the emperor had an ornate tomb built there in his honor. But that tomb lasted for about as long as Raijin's capture. Because when Raijin saw the words, "The Tomb of Shuguru, who caught the thunder," inscribed on the tomb, he became furious. He manifested himself into a bolt of lightning and blasted Shuguru's tomb, damaging it severely. But in the process, he got himself caught in a crevice and was trapped on Earth yet again.
He's in the crevice.
Shit, he's in the crevice.
And while Raijin was caught in this unfortunate position, the emperor took advantage. Over the next 7 days, he had Shuguru's tomb rebuilt even more extravagantly with a new phrase engraved on it: "The tomb of Shuguru, who caught the thunder," not only when he was alive, but also after he died. And if you thought it was humiliating for Raijin to get himself imprisoned not once, but twice, you're gonna feel really sorry for him after this next story. So you remember how I mentioned that Raijin has an obsession with belly buttons? Well, that obsession took the form of a craving, as in, he liked eating them. And a mortal man named Shokuro planned to use Raijin's peculiar palate against him. Shokuro's scheme entailed tying a human navel to the end of a kite string to lure the storm god into taking his bait, like a more sadistic version of Ben Franklin's famous experiment with the key on the kite. But in order to do this, he'd first have to find a navel he can steal. Lucky for Shokuro, while he was walking through the forest contemplating his plan, he saw a beautiful woman named Ochiyo approaching from down the path, and she was completely alone. As she got closer, Shokuro played the part of a chivalrous gentleman, acting concerned about her traveling alone and whether or not she was headed in the right direction, but the moment that Ochiyo turned her back to him, he slit her throat, cut out her navel, and then threw her body in a ditch. Shokuro took off towards his home, ready to take the next step in his scheme, when Raijin discovered Ochiyo's body in the ditch and was absolutely smitten by her beauty. He noticed her belly button was missing, so he took one that he was chewing on out of his mouth and attached it to her body. Don't ask. Then he restored her to life, married her, and took her with him to his home in the sky. Serious question, do you think that he used some kind of magic incantation to bring her to life, or did he just use his hands like a defibrillator? Either way, Raijin and Ochiyo were consumed by their love for each other. When they embraced, it was like they were the only two beings that mattered. But one day, Ochiyo noticed something out of the corner of her eye. A kite had risen through the clouds, and at the end of its string was her navel. Now up to this point, Ochiyo was clueless about the identity of her murderer, but thanks to his kite, she could follow the string directly to him. She took his bait and confronted Shokuro face to face, and Raijin was not far behind her. But as much as I would like to say that Raijin finished Shokuro just like Raiden from Mortal Kombat would, I would be lying. He tried to punish Shokuro for his crimes, but the mortal man kicked his ass. Then Shokuro apologized to Ochiyo for good measure. And as embarrassed as Raijin was that his beloved's killer had just laid him out flat, Ochiyo was willing to forgive Shokuro, so Raijin had no choice but to accept. From that point onward, Shokuro would be famous in his village for being the man who lured thunder to earth and then beat the crap out of it. Now, if you're anything like me, after hearing a story like that, you can't help but wonder, what the was the point of that? Well, like many folktales and myths, it's hard to say for sure why the story was told, shared, and preserved for centuries, but we do have an interesting theory. Some experts believe that Raijin's obsession with belly buttons was born out of mankind's fear of being struck by lightning. To this day, it's common folk tradition in Japan for parents to tell their kids to hide their belly buttons because Raijin will eat them if they're exposed. As a result, children crouch low in order to protect their belly buttons, and in the process become a smaller, shorter, less visible target for lightning strikes. But as hilarious as these Raijin stories are, I would be lying if I said he was a complete failure. One of the reasons he gets so much respect from his worshippers in Japan is because of how he saved them from the Mongols twice in 13th century CE. You see, in November of 1274, Kublai Khan, the grandson of Genghis Khan and leader of the Mongols, had his sights set on Japan. His army had already conquered much of the East Asian mainland, and now he wanted control of the island. Unlucky for them, as they sailed toward Japan, an overnight storm destroyed half their fleet and pushed the other half back out to sea, forcing the Mongols to retreat and recover, while Japan bolstered its defenses. 5 years later, the Mongols tried advancing again, but this time a typhoon tore through their fleet and destroyed nearly 90% of their army. After this, Raijin and Fujin would be forever hailed as guardians of the Japanese people for holding off their enemies not once but twice, and shrines would be built in their honor. If I were to hazard a guess, I would say this myth is what inspired the creators of Mortal Kombat to grant their version of Raiden with the title of Earthrealm Protector. Similar to the overwhelming number of Mongol forces Japan faced, in the game, Outworld is constantly invading Earthrealm and attempts to take control of it. But time after time, they're sent running home with their tails between their legs. Of course, Raiden isn't actually doing the defending himself in the earlier stories, rather it's his job to find martial artists like Liu Kang to fight for freedom in the Mortal Kombat tournament, but when he's not bound by the rules of the tournament, he does plenty of ass whooping. Then in the later games, he takes on a much more proactive approach, attempting to eliminate Earthrealm's enemies before they're a threat. At least that was Raiden for about 11 total seconds before the writers decided to reset the canon storyline for the 1000th time. But I'll spare you a tangent on the maddening amount of wasted potential there is with Mortal Kombat story. Instead, I want to ask for your thoughts on Raijin and his many iterations in pop culture. Did you know these characters were based on a real god? And which myth about Raijin was your favorite? Let me know in a comment. Then remember to sacrifice those like and subscribe buttons for more messed up mythology and folklore content every single Thursday and new shorts 4 days a week. Until next time, my name is John Solo, and remember, John shot first.